woman's body changes in pregnancy.
I'm so scared I can't do this. You're not alone.
Hello there, JK. How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
Not too bad, thanks. So thanks very much for speaking to me. So I'm curious. I mean, you said that it's obviously safer for your kids. You'll be able to bring your kids up there, educate your kids better in New Zealand than anywhere else. Which it's kind of curious because this film kind of hones in on the kids being brought up in New Zealand. Can you tell me a little bit about the genesis of where this whole idea of repressed memories of childhood and kind of setting it where you set it, where that all came to mind?
Well, so the original, I mean, the whole project started with just back in the States, back in about, I don't know, 2010, 2012, just hanging out with friends, and somehow it came up, people talking about bizarre, their mothers, just crazy mothers, and passive aggressive manipulations or gaslighting or sort of ridiculous stories about really odd mothers, really eccentric mothers, and how, growing up, that creates your reality. That sort of psychological schema is imparted to you as a child, and that's your reality. But then as you leave the house, you start to develop your own view of reality. And then going back, encountering that, it's bizarre, it's humorous, it's odd. You see the person still expecting, the mother in this case, expecting the adult child to respond in ways as they did before, but it's not working, it's not clicking. Yet sometimes it does provoke a person. So sort of figuring out how to maintain a relationship with someone on different standards from what it originated. So that was sort of how that began. And I originally was going to do like a dark comedy, just a super no budget film with just two actresses at a cabin nearby where I lived in Cape Cod,
right,
in New England. And but then over time, I left the country, and over time it just developed into something much, much darker. At one point it got extremely evil and nihilistic and quite toxic. And as production got delayed, I started to change it and bring in some of the magical realist elements. So that's that. The setting, it's not meant to be New Zealand specifically. I try to keep it as sort of vague or ambiguous as possible. It was originally going to be like a New England cottage, in wintertime, and just due to production and location, all these other things, we had to change it. But I never wanted it to be specifically Kiwi. And then as far as repressed memories and things, yeah, that's it's part of the stuff I research, and it's just something that I think a lot of people experience. That it's a way of bringing or dramatizing how the past affects the present. How things that are it's a way that the past sort of breaks into the present in a very real way. It's not so much that memories are repressed, it's that they're not integrated. So these sort of disastrous events that occur to someone, they happen in a way that they're not able to be integrated as a whole experience. So little bits and pieces of it come out and determine behavior, determine outlook, and all these kinds of things. So yeah, that's what that was about.
I mean, I read that you did a doctorate on something similar, not that how film can emote these kind of repressed memories. Is that where the idea came from for the film, or was the film did the film come before you decided to really
it's all
this?
jumbled. Yeah, it's all jumbled together. Yeah, it's all part of interest, and you can find it in a lot of films, even in films that aren't about psychological themes. That's what the thesis is about. It's just about how certain films that aren't even about psychology actually recreate this experience. I mean, the obvious one is flashbacks. Everyone now speaks about flashbacks. It's accepted. I mean, but there's there are other symptoms of these disorders that are in film that people aren't naming. So that's what the thesis is about, besides flashbacks. So
yeah, so I'm really curious about how you approached it, because 9 times out of 10, for me especially, when films start going into flashbacks, it's risky territory, because a lot of times it can be over explanatory or pull people out of the film. So I mean, you've got flashbacks, but there's all these different elements that you use to create these feedbacks. How did you approach that to make sure that the audience isn't pulled out, and you don't kind of get over explanatory and don't reveal too much in all of these different scenes that you use?
That's a great question. It's a really tough, it's a real challenge if you're aware of it, if you're aware of exactly the issue you're describing, where flashbacks are just used as exposition, then it's a cheap way of using, it's like voiceover narration. I mean, it can be done well, but oftentimes it isn't. So with the flashbacks, they were never meant to be expository, because in actuality, flashbacks are intrusive memories. You know, they impose themselves, and they're fragmented. So the idea was focusing on the film from Ellie's character's point of view, which is the subjectivity where these things might appear, or they would come back in little bits and pieces, and they would be provoked or triggered by things in the present tense. So there's always a correlation to what's in the present and how the past comes, and how it gradually accumulates and coheres over time as she's exposed to more of the past and the relationship with the mother in the house and these kinds of things. So that was the idea, was try and originally it was like having the two timelines merge, where the past is sort of interjected into the present in ways that aren't conventional, and gradually those things sort of overlap and create this sort of feedback loop. So that was always the idea, and the balance as far as whether it works or not is dependent on the audience. Some people might find it too obvious or expository. Other people are totally confused, have no idea what's going on. So
No. I think it worked, but just in a lot of films, I don't usually enjoy it. Usually, kind of pulls me out of the film. I don't. There's kind of things that spoil a little bit, but you can kind of see what's coming, which I appreciate about this film. Also, tied to that was the actors. How did you approach those same aspects with the actors to kind of let them in on the view, that on the idea that you had, this concept that you had?
I just, for the actors, the idea was for them to focus on their character and to try and get consistency and consistency and change as needed through the scenes. So it was in the script. It was written there that there were going to be these two timelines, and sort of the two different kinds of representations of character. But because it was shot out of order, because we set the house for the present tense, and then we had to change all that to shoot the past in the last couple days of the shoot. So everything was out of order. And the main thing in this kind of production, when everything is out of order, even though it's a single location, we did not shoot in order. You had to get some sort of logic to the performances of the shooting scene 50 on day one, and then scene 1 on day 15. Then it's more a matter of that than the flashbacks, because they were distinct. When we shot them, they were just set, shot totally separately. So working with him was good. Julia has a real strong narrative sense, so she has a real sense of story. She's got the experience of being through films and trying to have her character in some way explain story and anticipate that. So she had a real strong sense of understanding.
Yeah, I mean, Julia, I was reading an interview that Julia gave, and she said that you were quite uncompromising in a good way about the integrity of what you wanted this film to be. What does she mean exactly by that, do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I appreciate that, but you'd have to ask what she meant specifically. It's I think what I would say, the way I would say it, is that I definitely had a very clear idea of what the film was meant to be and what the intentions were. There wasn't any doubt about what it was meant to be and how it was meant to be made. Whether or not in the execution, it's another matter. I mean, there's a lot of variables involved with filming, changes that happen, things you have to adapt to, things that are possible or not possible, and all that stuff affects the outcome. So as far as like in a moral sense, uncompromising, that's true. But as far as actual practically speaking to how it turns out, that's another question.
Yeah. And another important factor in the film, of course, is the house. And it feels to me that it was every single tiny detail was you had exactly in your mind exactly what you wanted, everything that you wanted in there. That must have been quite a nightmare to set out, not just because of the house itself, but because you did it in 2 different timelines as well.
Yeah, the house was great. We did a really thorough search for locations. It's hard to find big houses like that in New Zealand. It's not very common. And any ones that have existed, historic houses, have been renovated and are totally modern. and there's no film shooting there. So this one had not been totally renovated. The walls were totally white, so all the everything there is completely brought. And yeah, so it was specific. I mean, we had a plan. I wanted the textures and the wallpapers, and we wanted lots of patterns and things like this, and just make it cluttered. So we did what we could with the budget and just made it sort of fit that idea as much as possible. And then it was bizarre. After we did all that, we stripped everything out, cleaned out, wrapped, and the renters who moved in after we left actually peeled the white walls off, and there was actual original, like 100-year-old wallpaper under
Really?
beautiful floor prints that we could have used if we'd known it was there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Something else I'm really curious about was this book that's Ivy's character is studying. Where did all that come from? Because it talks about at the beginning, for example, you give us a lot of information in the credits at the beginning about black magic and all these kind of things. How much of that played a part in you coming up with the script as well?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, that's all. So that's Ellie's doing her book project on sort of how the concept that chemistry comes from alchemy. This kind of thing of how magical thinking leads to natural philosophy develops into science and these kinds of things, and magical thinking leads to the scientific method. So the images are all real. The combinations aren't. I've sort of took disparate ideas and put them together into a thesis. But that was it's based on different things. I guess one of the most basic things is the idea that Carl Jung was talking about, where he was talking about spiritual alchemy, the idea that alchemy was not necessarily a physical process, but it was meant to be an esoteric sort of psychological process of developing oneself from base metal into gold, which is like the spiritual analogy of that. So it's one way of interpreting these texts, and some of this material is as a psychological or spiritual process.
And just one last question. I mean, you mentioned there earlier that the script started life more on the comedy side of things, no? New Zealand, obviously, I mean, it's got a bit of everything, but it's very popular, especially in this specific genre for kind of spoofs and horror comedies. We've had Housebound, which shares a few similarities, no?
Yeah, that was great.
How did the project switch from this genre comedy style to something more dark? And was it harder to get this produced than it would have been if it had been the original version of the script over there in New Zealand?
Yes. So the first question, I mean, I'd never written the comedy version of it. That was just that was a concept. I'd written down a lot of scenarios. I was going to do it as a no budget improvised work with just these actresses. So I hadn't written the comedy version of that. The first drafts I'd written in New Zealand for the Film Commission were extremely dark, like evil, like just truly evil, and that was what got development funding. So the idea that it was in any way considered to be within a genre space of horror meant that it was more likely to get funding. So what happened was the U.S. producer Mike Ryan had a relationship with MPI, who ended up giving the private money side of it, and then on this side we got the Film Commission funding, and those two things combined because of that genre aspect. And I think that's international at this point. I'm pretty sure it's not just for New Zealand. I don't think the commission was looking for anything particularly horror based, except that it brought in some MPI funding internationally.
Okay.
Housebound was a great film. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, it's a fantastic film. Yeah, I loved it as well. Yeah. So yeah, just to finish off, then obviously you've got this coming out in America next week, and then can you tell us anything that you plan to release anytime soon?
Yeah, I've got several things going. I've written a few features, screenplays that are out to different people and in different ways, trying to get made. And then I've got some micro budget stuff I'm working on here as well. So,
is that where you'll be branching out into different genres, or are you going to be sticking with this kind of genre?
Yeah, no, they're all different. Some ones or two are definite horror, and I mean true straight horror, like brutal, bloody, nightmarish horror, which I want to do.
I'd like to see
And
that because this one really, that really has me piqued to see more evil
yeah,
stuff from you. Yeah.
more violence. And then the other ones are just one's drama, thriller, one's sort of a B-grade action movie. Yeah, it's all kinds of stuff. So.
That's brilliant. Well, thanks so much for your time, Jake. Really good to speak to you. And I wish you the best luck with the film at the end of the week. And I hope to speak to you about another project in sometime in the future.
Great, thanks a lot, Howard.
All right, nice to speak. Take care then.
Bye-bye.
All the best.